My brother proposed to my fiancée to prove she loved him more than me, but all it proved was that he has a single-digit IQ, and now my parents are on his side. I, 28M, have a brother, Mark, 26M, who used to date my fiancée, Jen, 26F, about a year ago. They were only together for a month before he broke things off because he got bored of being in a relationship and said he never really wanted to settle down anyway. At the time they were dating, I was living in another state, so I had no idea he even had a girlfriend. And I didn't know who Jen was until I met her later. Jen and I met at a bar when I moved back home in October. We hit it off right away. She was easily the most beautiful and intelligent woman I'd ever met. We saw each other a few more times, and soon we made things official. Fast forward to December. I finally told my family about her and suggested they meet her at Christmas. They already knew I was seeing someone, but I'm not very open about my personal life. So I hadn't shared many details until I was sure things were serious. My parents asked to see pictures, so I passed my phone around the dinner table. That's when Mark saw a photo of Jen and completely lost it. He started yelling, calling me a crap-smelling brother for dating his ex-girlfriend, and demanded I break up with her. I refused. When I talked to Jen about it later, she confirmed that she and Mark had dated briefly and explained all the details of their breakup. It took a few weeks, but eventually Mark stopped mentioning it. I figured he had finally gotten over it. Then, on Jen's birthday this year, I took her out to a fancy dinner with both of our families and her closest friends, and I proposed to her. Mark flipped out again and caused a scene in front of everyone. My sisters and I immediately shut him down. The big incident happened this past weekend. Mark had been quiet for the last 2 months, barely spoke to me, and I assumed he had gone low contact, which honestly I was fine with. Then out of nowhere, he invited Jen and me to a family dinner at his apartment. He said our parents and sisters would be there too, so we figured it was safe and agreed to go. Dinner was nice, nothing fancy. Afterward, we all moved to the living room to chat. About 30 minutes into the conversation, Mark stood up and said he had an announcement. He gave this long, dramatic speech about how happy he was to have his family around for his big moment. Then, to everyone's shock, he got down on one knee, pulled out a cheap ring, and asked Jen to marry him. Jen was completely confused and uncomfortable. She demanded he put the ring away and stand up. My dad tried to grab him, but I got to him first and punched him. I honestly don't remember most of what was said after that because I was furious, but I do remember him saying something along the lines of, "I just wanted to show you that Jen isn't really into you. She just wanted to get back at me." Before things could get worse, my parents rushed me out and promised they'd talk to him. It's been a few days since it happened, and I'm still pissed off. I don't even know what to do at this point. I'm scared Jen might have second thoughts about marrying me because of this whole situation. Any advice? 2 days later. First, I want to thank everyone who read my post. It's been a busy weekend, so I haven't had the chance to reply to many people, but I really appreciate all the feedback, even the criticisms. Now for the update, I called Mark and asked him to meet up with me at my place to talk. I told him I'd prefer for Jen to be there too, but I was fine if he didn't want that. He agreed to talk to both of us and showed up around noon today. At first, it was awkwardly quiet. Then I started the conversation. I apologized for not giving him a heads up about my proposal to Jen and also for hitting him. He said whatever, but admitted he appreciated the apology. Then told him what Jen had said about their relationship and breakup when I first asked her about it. I asked Mark to confirm if what Jen had told me about their relationship was true. I explained that his reactions throughout this whole situation had been extreme, and I wanted to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding how serious things had been between them. He confirmed that they only dated for a few weeks and that he was the one who ended things because he lost interest Jen, then asked him if he was acting this way because he still had feelings for her or maybe regretted breaking up. He said he could admit that he found her more attractive now than when they last saw each other, but insisted he didn't have any lingering feelings or regrets. According to him, he just didn't like the idea of seeing a girl he dated, even briefly, with his older brother. He said that as a man, I'd violated him by pursuing something serious with his ex. I reminded him that I had no idea they had dated when Jen and I first met, so it's not like I knowingly did anything against him. He just shrugged and said it didn't matter, that I still should have broken things off once I found out. He was adamant that if the roles were reversed, he would have done the same thing, which frankly, I doubt. I asked him why he proposed to Jen if he didn't have any lingering feelings for her. To sum it up, he said he'd been talking to one of his buddies, a guy who knew him back when he and Jen dated. That friend apparently put the idea in his head that maybe Jen knew from the start that we were brothers and was dating me to get back at him, since she had supposedly been hung up on him after they broke up. So, according to Mark, he and his buddy thought it would be a good idea to test that theory. And that's how he came up with the insane idea to propose to her in front of everyone. Just to see if she'd dump me for him, Jen asked him to elaborate on why he thought she was hung up on him. He said he'd heard that after their breakup, she'd asked about him and was still hanging out at the same places they used to go together. So, in his mind, that made it a valid assumption. Jen told him she had only asked about him once after the breakup, and that she'd been hanging out at those same places with friends even before they started dating, so she wasn't going to change her routine just because of a breakup. She also said she was deeply offended by the idea that she would stoop so low as to date or marry me just to get revenge on him. Mark just shrugged, gave her a half-hearted apology, and said she had to see it from his point of view. He asked her if she really hadn't known that we were brothers. She explained that she honestly hadn't noticed the resemblance between us until she saw us in the same room, and since we act nothing alike, it had never even crossed her mind. He accepted that and said, okay, that pretty much wrapped up the conversation. Before he left, he told me I could take back his invitation to the wedding because he couldn't bring himself to support our relationship knowing he used to date Jen. I told him not to worry about it because he was probably going to be uninvited anyway. It's been a few hours since that talk, and honestly, I feel a lot better. My parents aren't thrilled about him being uninvited, but they understand it was a mutual decision and probably for the best. My sisters told me they knew Mark didn't have any good reason for acting like such a jerk and that they don't blame me for not wanting him at the wedding, for now. I'm going to limit contact with Mark, and I doubt he'll be reaching out to me anytime soon either. Months later. It's been a while since my last post, but a few things have happened since my last conversation with Mark. I've kept things low contact with him since then. I haven't called, and he hasn't called me. Our only interactions have been at family gatherings, and that's how it stayed. As it stands now, my mom is upset that Mark is still uninvited from my wedding. It all started with a comment made during my younger sister Sophie's 22th birthday. Her boyfriend of about 4 years proposed to her at the end of the night, and afterward, we all sat around talking about what she envisioned for her dream wedding. She talked about wanting a destination wedding, her ideas for the cake and dress, and then she said something like, "Teddy, I know Mark's banned from your wedding, but you won't care if he comes to mine, right?" I laughed it off and told her I couldn't get mad about her guest list even if I wanted to. My mom gave me this weird look and asked if Mark was still not invited to my wedding. I told her yes, and she immediately got irritated. She said she thought I was joking and accused me of being unreasonable for banning him since he's family. She claimed I was holding a grudge just to be petty, reminded her that Mark and I had mutually agreed he wouldn't attend. And I told her this wasn't the time to talk about my wedding since the day was supposed to be about Sophie. I added that if she or Mark wanted to discuss my wedding, they could call me another time. Sophie even jumped in and scolded our mom for trying to make her special day about Mark again. After that, my mom dropped the issue. For those wondering, Mark wasn't at Sophie's party because he supposedly had to work and couldn't make it. A few days later, my mom stopped by my house and said she wanted to talk about the wedding. She asked why I was so adamant about not inviting Mark and told me I shouldn't be so insecure about his past with Jen. She said uninviting him was a step too far. I told her, again, that Mark and I had both agreed he wouldn't come, and if he had a problem with it, he could come talk to me himself. That turned into an argument. She said that if I wasn't going to re-invite Mark, then she wouldn't be coming either, because I was ostracizing her son. I shrugged and told her if that's how she felt, she could toss her invite in the trash because I wasn't going to beg her to attend. She asked if I'd really be okay with her not coming, and I told her it wouldn't be the first time she'd missed one of my events because of Mark. That hit a nerve. She called me a prick for throwing her past mistakes in her face and stormed out. Not long after, I started getting messages and phone calls from her, and a few other relatives saying I was in the wrong and urging me to invite Mark, just to keep the peace. Jen has also been getting messages from my mom asking her to talk to me, and convince me to change my mind. But as far as I know, Jen hasn't responded. At this point, most of my mom's side of the family is siding with her and refusing to attend. My dad and his side of the family, just my aunt, uncle, and their 2 kids, agree with me and are still planning to come. My sisters are still attending too, as well as Jen's family. I also reached out to Mark about it, just to confirm where he stood. He said he was the one who uninvited himself in the first place. And he doesn't understand why everyone's making such a big deal out of it, since he still doesn't want to go. He told me to leave him out of the fighting because he's not involved, and said he'd tell our mom the same thing. As of now, I'm back to being low contact with my mom. Though my dad and I are still on decent terms, I'm still deciding whether I'll re-invite my mom or her side of the family if they change their minds about the boycott. But honestly, the chances are low. I've already told my dad that, and he understands. For now, Jen and I have started looking into downsizing the venue since our guest list is significantly smaller, weeks later. My mom is now officially uninvited from the wedding, indefinitely. About 2 weeks after she decided not to come, she stopped by our house and said she wanted to clear the air and talk about everything. We agreed and invited her in to join us for dinner. Jen made her a plate of food, and after we sat down, I asked if she was still planning on not attending the wedding. She said that while she wanted to come, she couldn't get over me not inviting Mark because, in her words, it was just a simple mistake. I reminded her that his simple mistake was proposing to my fiancé while I was sitting less than 3 feet away from him. She brushed it off and said it was just a joke. Jen asked her why. She even wanted to talk if she was still holding the same stance about Mark attending. My mom said she wanted to talk to Jen and was hoping Jen would hear her out and convince me to invite Mark again. Apparently, she'd assumed I was at work and was trying to catch Jen alone. Jen politely told her that while she understood her intentions, she never would have had that conversation without me present, since this situation involves both of us. As soon as Jen said she wouldn't have that kind of conversation without me present, my mom rolled her eyes and made a snide comment, something like, "Of course she can't. Jen's so spineless she can't have a conversation without you thinking for her." That started a heated back and forth between the 3 of us. Eventually, Jen had enough and told my mom to leave. As Jen got up and walked toward the door, my mom followed her, still screaming. By that point, she was yelling about how Jen was tearing our family apart. While Jen was unlocking the front door, my mom suddenly grabbed her by the hair and yanked her to the ground, still screaming. Then she hit Jen and tried to claw at her face. I pulled my mom off her and physically threw her outside. She banged on the door for several minutes while I made sure Jen was okay. Eventually, she left, but started calling both of us repeatedly afterward. When I was certain Jen was all right, I texted my mom and told her not to bother reaching out again, because we would never speak to her again. I called my dad and sisters to tell them what happened. My dad was shocked and tried to make excuses, saying my mom had been stressed about the whole situation for a while. My sisters, on the other hand, said they knew she'd snap eventually since she's always been a crazy bikey, and they offered to come over to check on Jen. I asked Jen if she wanted to press charges, but she declined, saying she just wanted to cut contact with my mom for good. I told her that part was already a given, but she should still talk to the police since she'd been physically assaulted. Jen said she didn't want my mom arrested. Thankfully, my sisters and Jen's mom came by to comfort her, and she's doing okay now. My mom is blocked on everything until Jen says otherwise. I honestly don't know what to do next. Jen doesn't want to go to the police because she feels guilty about the idea of having my mom arrested. But my sisters and I are trying to convince her to at least file a report, just to have documentation in case something happens in the future, days later. Some people have been asking questions about my mom and about why I wasn't more open with Jen regarding my relationship with my parents. So I figured I'd give a little background on why things have always been so complicated. Like a few of you guessed, Mark was the golden child. He was my mom's baby boy, and she didn't do much to hide it. My parents didn't spend much time with my sisters or me like normal parents do, unless they absolutely had to. But they spent as much time as possible with Mark. They'd take him shopping while leaving us with a babysitter, or they'd come home with his favorite food and toys while we got nothing. He always got better things than we did. New, expensive clothes while ours were thrifted. Brand new toys just for him, while my sisters and I had to share old ones. If we ever got gifts, they were for us to share. But my mom made it crystal clear that Mark's things were his alone, and we weren't allowed to touch them. When Mark would screw up, I got punished because I wasn't being a good role model or didn't show him the proper way to behave. For example, when Mark went through a phase of breaking all his toys, I got the beating. According to my mom, he must have learned the behavior from me. When he was 8, Mark got in trouble at school for trying to push another kid down the stairs. I was grounded for 2 weeks and made to apologize to the kid for not teaching my brother better. When I turned 13, I started pushing my parents to give me an allowance. They finally agreed, as long as I did household chores like mowing the lawn, taking out the trash, raking leaves, etc. It was about $25 a week, which I was excited about since I wanted to start saving. But as soon as Mark saw I was getting money, he begged my parents for an allowance too. Instead of making him work for it, they decided that $10 of my allowance would be given to him every week, as a reward for us doing such a good job with chores. He, of course, never helped with a single one of them. Whenever I asked him to pitch in, he'd say, "It's not my job to do chores, so why should I bother?" It was around that time I really started distancing myself from my brother. By the time I got to high school, we only spoke when we needed small favors, or when we absolutely had to. When I turned 17, I got my first job. I wanted to finally earn my own money and buy my own car, money my parents couldn't take or give to Mark. My oldest sister, Maggie, helped me open my own bank account and taught me how to properly budget and save. After all my hard work, I finally bought my first car at 18. When Mark got his driver's license, my parents asked me to let him use my car to get around and get some extra practice behind the wheel. Reluctantly, I agreed. For a while, the arrangement worked fine. Mark used my car when I didn't need it, and he even helped maintain it. But after a few months, he started asking my parents for his own car. Instead of saying no, my mom came to me and told me I should just give him mine, because he needed it more. When I refused, she threatened to kick me out of the house. We had a huge fight that night, which ended with her taking Mark's side, again, and forcing me to transfer ownership of the car to him within the next few days. Since I didn't have anywhere else to go at the time, I just sucked it up and signed it over. When I graduated high school, both of my parents skipped the ceremony. Mark didn't want to sit through a long event just to see me get a piece of paper, and my mom didn't want to leave him home alone. So, I only had the support of my sisters, along with my aunt and uncle, who came to watch and take me out to celebrate afterward. But that plan didn't last long. They ended up having to bring me back home early because my parents had made dinner to make it up to me. The problem? The dinner was something I couldn't eat. My mom had put shrimp and chicken on the same serving dish, even though she knew I'm allergic to shellfish. During my first year out of high school, I worked 2 jobs to buy myself another car. At the start of the new school year, I moved away for college and cut contact with my parents completely. At first, they, mostly my mom, tried to reach out for a few months through social media and through my sister Sophie, but I never responded. I even told Sophie she'd be cut off too if she kept trying to reconnect us. When my mom realized she couldn't get to me through Sophie, she tried going through my older sister Charlotte, and a few times through Maggie and even Mark, until I threatened to file a restraining order for harassment. It was an empty threat. I had no idea how to actually file one, but it scared her off. After that, the most I ever received from her were the occasional "Happy Holidays" texts over the years. Around the time I moved back home, Charlotte told me that they had been seeing a family therapist at her request, and that my parents wanted to apologize for how they'd treated us. I was hesitant, but I agreed to hear them out, as long as they were genuine about it. The reconciliation process started around the time I moved back, but honestly, that barely scratches the surface of everything they put me through. It took a lot for me to even begin letting them back into my life. When I met Jen, I wasn't sure where our relationship was going or where things stood with my parents. I didn't want to mention my family at all, mostly because I was prepared to cut contact again if I had to. Jen understood that it was a sore subject and didn't press. For more details, I hope this helps shed some light on the questions people have been asking about why things are the way they are. 17 days later, Want to thank everyone who's taken the time to give me advice on what to do next, as well as all the kind messages and comments we've received over the past week. Jen and I have been reading the comments together, and we both really appreciate the support. 2. Answer the most common question, why I chose to reconnect with my parents after everything they did. The short answer is I would do anything for my sisters. Charlotte wanted the whole family to be around for the birth of her first child and to help her adjust afterward. She didn't want part-time aunts and uncles who would only show up for birthdays and holidays. She's never been the type to ask for much growing up. So when she asked if I'd be willing to try to reconnect for her sake, I agreed because it would make her happy. I also think a part of me hoped that maybe, just maybe, my parents had changed. I don't regret trying to reconcile either. My parents are still terrible, but I met the love of my life through that process. So honestly, I call it a win. A lot of people have been asking if there's any update since the assault. So here it is. We filed a report with the police. We were told that even though Jen doesn't want to press charges, it's not up to us whether the case goes further, but they would keep our preferences in mind. We provided solid evidence of the assault, including photos of Jen's face and text messages between my mom and dad about what happened. We were advised to report and document any future incidents involving my mom, just in case something else happens down the line. Given where we live, I doubt much will come of it, but at least now it's on record. A few days later, I received about 100 angry text messages from my mom, which told me that the police must have already spoken to her about the incident. Not long after, she showed up outside my workplace and tried to corner me in the parking lot as I was leaving. She started screaming at me about how I was trying to ruin her life. She yelled that I was an awful son for trying to get her arrested over a small misunderstanding, and that she didn't understand what she'd done to deserve being punished like this. I told her straight up that if she didn't want to be in legal trouble, maybe she shouldn't have hit Jen in the first place. She demanded that I tell the police to drop the report, but I refused. I reminded her of what the officer had said, that it was out of my hands now. She completely lost it in the parking lot, started screaming again, and even hit me a few times in the chest and arm before security stepped in and escorted her off the property. I had to explain the situation to my boss afterward, but thankfully, she was understanding once I told her what had been going on. When I got home, I told Jen what happened. She was upset, me understandably, and asked that we sit down and make a plan for how to deal with my family moving forward. It was a long talk, but in the end, we took the advice of a lot of Redditors and decided to go completely no contact with my family, except for my sisters. We both agreed that having my parents and Mark in my life is just adding unnecessary stress, and we're not even married yet. Jen said she wanted to seriously consider moving away to put distance between us and my family. She explained that she had tried to stay out of my family issues because it wasn't her place, but she refuses to deal with my mom's behavior, or my dad enabling her abuse, any longer. A lot more was said during that talk, too much to include here. But the bottom line is I completely agreed. My family is more trouble than they're worth, and I'm done putting up with it. I also agreed to start therapy, and Jen is helping me find a therapist. After our talk, I decided to call my dad to let him know that I was officially going no contact. He didn't answer the first time, so I left a message asking if we could have a long conversation. When he called back, he asked if it was okay for my mom to be part of the conversation too. I said that was fine. She needed to hear what I had to say as well. The conversation went about as well as you'd expect. I told them both that Jen and I were cutting them out of our lives. My dad immediately demanded to know why I'd do something like that after going through all the trouble of repairing our relationship. Explained that this whole situation with Mark had shown me that nothing was ever truly repaired between us. As far as they were concerned, the world still revolved solely around my mom and my little brother. I told them their constant favoritism toward Mark had brought our relationship to a point of no return, and I wasn't interested in holding on to something that was already broken. I explained that I only agreed to reconcile for Charlotte's sake, but I don't appreciate the disrespect toward Jen and me, and I won't tolerate it anymore for either of our sakes. To my mom specifically, I said I was tired of being her scapegoat, for her bad parenting, for Mark's entitled attitude, for everything. I told her I would never forgive her for what she did to Jen, nor for what she did to me and my sisters growing up. She tried to say I should move on like my sisters have, but I cut her off. I told her she should take their forgiveness and move on, because she would never receive it from me, especially not after everything she's done in the past few weeks. She started crying and asked how I could treat her like such a villain. Told her the only person she should be mad at is herself because I haven't done anything wrong. She cried harder and said she regretted having me, claiming I've done nothing but try to ruin her life. That started another heated argument, this time between her and Jen. Jen absolutely went off on her. In much more colorful words, Jen told her she was disgusting for saying something like that to her own son and called her a few other well-deserved names. I'm not sure if my mom left the room at that point or just decided to stay quiet, but she stopped talking once Jen was done. Then my dad spoke up. He said he wasn't okay with being shut out of my life and asked me to try to understand my mom's point of view. He said my mom was struggling too, that having her kids at odds with each other was tearing her apart, and that I was being unfair by punishing her for all the challenges she'd faced raising and caring for us. The last thing he said was that we were a family, and that I shouldn't let past mistakes stop us from moving forward together. I told him the only people my mom ever truly cared about were Mark and herself, and that there was nothing he could say or do to change my mind. I told him it was up to him whether he kept my number, but I would be blocking both him and my mom everywhere, and I wouldn't be reaching out again. Then I hung up. Afterward, I sat down and wrote a long email to my entire family, uninviting everyone except my aunt, uncle, and sisters from the wedding. I even attached a link to my Reddit post so they could see everything for themselves. I hadn't cried in a long time, but after sending that email, I broke down. Jen held me while I cried and kept reassuring me that we were going to be okay. My sisters reached out later after reading the email. I apologized to Charlotte for not being able to continue the reconciliation she wanted, but she told me it was okay, that none of this was my fault, and that I had to do what was right for my own peace. The response from the rest of my family has been mixed. Some are furious that I aired out family issues on a public forum, while others are actually upset with my parents because they never realized how bad things really were growing up. The last person I spoke to was Mark. He asked if I was cutting him off too. I told him I wasn't, but that I wouldn't be going out of my way to reach out to him either. He didn't argue. He just wished me the best with the wedding, and that was the last time we talked. Right now, Jen and I are looking for a new place to stay. The plan is to move closer to her brother, who lives about 3 hours away. We both really like the city he's in. I've already spoken to my boss about transferring, and Jen's exploring either working fully remote or finding a new job there. Since our guest list is significantly smaller now, our venue has changed. 2, my future brother-in-law is even considering letting us use his lake house for the ceremony. I don't plan on posting more about this unless something drastic happens, at least not until after the wedding. I just want to move on with life. Thanks again to everyone who's offered advice and kindness through all of this. Happy holidays. Months later, hey everyone. It's been a while since my last post. Things have been busy, but I saw a few requests for an update. So here it is. It's a small one, but an important one. I have a wife and a newborn daughter now. We found out Jen was pregnant right around the time of my last post, which basically kicked us into overdrive. We moved away, started fresh, and focused on building our own life. I was able to transfer to a new location, and Jen found a remote job that she actually loves. We got married 4 months ago at her brother's lake house. We hadn't planned on having the ceremony so soon, but we didn't want to wait until after the baby arrived. Plus, Jen found a dress she absolutely fell in love with and didn't want to outgrow it. It was a small, beautiful ceremony, mostly her family plus my sisters, my aunt, and my uncle. I know some people probably expected some huge blow-up or drama at the wedding, but honestly it was one of the best days of my life. Our daughter was born early last month. She's beautiful, happy, and healthy, and Jen's doing really well too. The last stretch of pregnancy was rough on her, both emotionally and physically, but she's been doing so much better since giving birth. She's seeing her doctor regularly during this postpartum phase due to some complications she had during pregnancy, but thankfully, there haven't been any major health concerns. Aside from occasionally complaining about the number of doctor visits, I don't think I've seen a single frown on her face since we brought our daughter home. As for my parents, I still haven't heard from my dad. My mom, though. That's a different story. Apparently, my uncle sent them some photos from the wedding. A few days later, my mom made a fake Facebook account and started spamming both Jen and me with angry messages about being excluded. From the wedding, from Jen's pregnancy, from everything. She went on this long, unhinged tirade about how she was entitled to be part of her grandchild's life, and how unfair it was that she wasn't allowed to be involved. She demanded that we visit her, asked to visit us, and even had the audacity to ask if she could be in the delivery room. I shut all of it down immediately. I took screenshots of every single message and emailed them to myself, just in case. Kept all of my mom's messages, screenshots, timestamps, everything, and emailed them to myself in case I ever need them for a restraining order in the future. After that, I blocked her completely. I haven't heard from her since. But I know she's been harassing my sisters, calling, texting, and trying to guilt them into talking to Jen and me on her behalf. I don't know exactly what they're doing about it, but I've made it clear that Jen and I have nothing left to discuss with her, ever again. For everyone asking about Mark, yes, we've been in contact. A little. He actually called after we came back from our honeymoon to congratulate us on both the wedding and the pregnancy. We ended up having a long talk about everything that happened. I won't go into all the details, but we both got to say a lot that needed to be said. He offered what honestly felt like a sincere apology to both me and Jen for everything he did. The proposal stunt, the manipulation, all of it. Since then, we've texted a few times, just small talk, quick life updates, nothing deep. He did say he'd like to grab a drink together the next time I'm in town. I told him I'd think about it. I don't know if I'll actually take him up on it, but I appreciated the gesture. And just to clear this up before anyone asks, Mark doesn't know where we live, and I intend to keep it that way. If he chooses to share general updates about my life with my parents, that's his decision. But I won't be giving him any details that could help them find us or show up unannounced. Unfortunately, even if we're able to rebuild some kind of relationship, I know I'll never fully trust him again.